Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's Evil Monkey here, and today we got to recap the second anniversary stream for the First Descendant, which showed off a whole bunch of amazing things for the first half of Season 4. We're going to have so much stuff to do for the remainder of this year, so I'm not even going to yap here. I'm just going to get you guys straight into there so you guys can get excited about it too. Okay, so while there was a lot of cool stuff announced at this second anniversary, I figured the first thing I wanted to show you guys was the roadmap, because this has to be probably the most important thing shown because it kind of gives an overview of everything that I planned. And there's a lot of cool stuff here, which we'll deep dive into a little bit more in their actual sections. But they said this is currently the overview for the second half of 2026. They also said as we get closer to each of these things, there will be a more in-depth roadmap of each episode and month. They said this is just a general overview, so this is not everything they have planned. Each month will have a lot more content than this. This is just, once again, kind of the highlights of every month so far. I'm sure the thing most people are curious about from this roadmap right now is something that's been talked about a lot, and that's the Transcendent Weapons. So let's go ahead and go into that, because they did go over this a little bit. Now, the first thing I want to mention about this is they did say, on launch of Season 4, there will be 11 of these Transcendent Weapons that we can get. And yes, each one of those does go towards mastery points. So you'll be able to get a lot of mastery once Season 4 launches. Now, they talked a little bit about the overview of how these weapons will work and the system for them. By the way, the system for grinding these, if it's like how they described and it's handled correctly, will actually be a really good endgame loop. So let's first go into how these are going to work. So if you guys don't know what these are, it's kind of similar to Ancestor modules. They're basically random rolled weapons. And how they're going to be random rolled is they're going to have a main ability and then two sub abilities. And the main ability roll will affect the unique ability, similar to, like, for example, Blue Beetle's unique ability that gives it increased skill critical hit rate whenever you use a fusion ability. So that type of unique ability will be affected by one of the rolls. Not that Blue Beetle will have a replacement, but that's just an example of a unique ability. So in this one, they brought up this gun called Armis, which seems to be a missile-like gun. That's at least its unique ability. They said the unique ability would affect these. In fact, it will have 3 different roles for its unique ability. Once again, they only showed one example, so it wasn't fully clear on this. But it seems like depending on that role, it will affect kind of what they think the gun's purpose will be. So if you roll one stat really high, it might make the gun like a wave clear gun. If you roll another stat really high, it might make it a single target gun. Once again, they weren't super clear on this. I really wish they had given us multiple weapon examples so we could kind of compare the system, because once again, it just wasn't very clear on this. Plus, since all this is being translated, there's sometimes information that gets lost in translation, which just happens when you translate from one language to another. It's very easy for things to get kind of lost in that translation. So this, I'm not sure how in-depth the role will be for our unique ability. It does seem like it will affect it, but I'm not certain to what extent. It seems like it might just be damage rolls, but could be more. We'll have to wait until they actually give us like a full-fledged example in the video, or Season 4 actually comes out. But we do know it will affect that unique ability. Then, your substats. Now, this is where your substats are where it gets kind of interesting. These ones don't seem like they'll affect the unique ability, but they're kind of like weapon cores from the current game. But they'll be random rolled. So, they mentioned you could roll something like fire rate, or some other stats like that. And they said how sub options will work is you'll be able to roll 3 different types. Either a single value, which will just be a positive one. You'll be able to roll a different one that will be 2 stats. Or another one that's 1 positive stat and 1 negative. So this is very similar to how Ancestor modules roll. Currently in Ancestor modules, you can roll something like 2 positives or 3 positives, or 2 positives and a negative, or 3 positives and a negative. It'll be similar with the new Transcendent Weapons. You'll be able to roll either a positive, 2 positives, or positive negative. Now I imagine the positive negative one will probably be the one everyone goes for, since that'll probably give the highest rolls. Now let's go into how you actually get these. So they said you will be able to get these through any part of the game. So even if you're a new player or a veteran player, you'll be able to get them. But what will affect the values you can roll will be the difficulty of the game. So if you're way at the beginning of the game, you won't be able to roll very high values. But if you're, a veteran doing the latest endgame modes, you'll be able to do a pretty good job at getting good rolls. They said, for example, if you're in, the one of the newer game modes, the values might roll from something like, you would have a range of 300 to 400%. So, pretty high values. Now, the thing that I really like about this is they also said the range will shrink the more you play. So they said if you keep playing, so for that 300 to 400% example, it would go from something to like that to being a range of 320% to 400. Eventually, if you kept grinding, the percentage would just be 400% to 400%, so you just get the guaranteed max roll. I like this system because it does incentivize grinding and rewards the players. The thing we'll have to see from this, though, is how long it takes. If it takes, 2 hours, then, you're rewarding your players a lot, and it might make the grind too easy, but if it takes, 100 hours to grind out that perfect weapon, it's not rewarding at all, and it feels miserable. So you have to, strike a right balance of, you feel like you earned it because you put in a lot of time, but not so much that you feel like your time's not being valued. I think this is something they'll have to play around with as they come out with this, but I do think it's a good idea in the system because it does, once again, reward the players for grinding. But that's pretty much all the information they gave us. It does look like a really good system, and I'm really, really excited for this. So I'm sure after Weapons, the next thing everyone's most curious about is the characters or the Descendants. Well, before we go over all the new Descendants announced and Ultimate Descendants talked about, I just want to quickly go over some stuff they mentioned about characters in general. So they said going forward, because a lot of the new content is going to be more than just, kill everything. There's going to be mechanics and everything, and some stuff that causes more specialized things that need to be done. They said they want to go forward with designing Descendants to not just be, hey, we need this Descendant to be the highest DPS in the game. They want the Descendants to be able to fill certain roles so that they're better at certain modes than other characters. For example, Descendant A, B, C, and D may be good at game mode 1, and then maybe Descendant E, F may be good at game mode 2. They want Descendants to be good at different things. Now, I don't know what these kind of roles will look like because they didn't go in depth into them. They didn't really talk about this even in the gameplay section. They just said there will be new mechanics and these roles would hopefully fit into them. So we'll see how that is going forward. There was another thing brought up, though, for balance, and that was for male Descendants. So I'm sure, as most people realized, generally a lot of the female Descendants have been stronger than the male Descendants, and so in a Q&A section, someone basically asked, well, what is up with that? Do you guys plan to continue doing that going forward, or are you going to change your minds on that and make male Descendants more viable and stronger? And they did actually have an opinion on this. They said, we know this has been going on. We know that people feel like all the male Descendants are weaker. And going forward, they said they want to change that. In fact, to quote them, they said, we hope to prove this with Blair's Rebalance that's coming out later this month. So hopefully that means Blair's going to be relatively strong, and not just a, wow, they really messed up Blair with this rework. I would be really happy with this because Blair's honestly my favorite Descendant in the entire game. He was the first character I ever messed with in this game. Well, didn't mess with, the first character I ever did full builds for. So I would be really happy if they actually made Blair really good. And, I'd be excited if going forward a lot more of the male Descendants are more viable. I think SEMO was pretty good with his. I think there was like a couple issues with like how he had some abilities split between different types that made him not like S tier, but his rework was still, really good and enjoyable. So hopefully this is a good sign going forward that a lot more of the male descendants will be more viable, so we get some more diversity in characters that are played, because it does suck that, a good chunk of the cast of characters that we can play just are garbage. So hopefully going forward, all those characters will be more playable, and we'll get that full range of cast of characters. Now, speaking of male descendants, one of the cool things they announced, and Jayber mains can rejoice about this, we got Ultimate Jayber announced. You guys may have saw this in the roadmap. It's not until December, so they gave no information on it, other than that he's going to be the next one after Ultimate Hailey. But it is really exciting, because that probably means he'll get a rework when that happens. And it's something really cool, because I personally really like turret characters in games, and always felt like they kind of did Jayber dirty. Like, he got screwed over so many times. But we've had other successful turret characters, like Combat Protocol, Ultimate Eugen, so hopefully Ultimate Jayber will be good. And the next thing that was announced was Ultimate Hailey was talked about. You guys can see on screen there, they showed off how she looks. I think her skin looks really, really good for Ultimate Edition. But, I know this may be a weird comment, but it does seem like one of her assets got a little bit reduced there. I'm not sure if this is just because the artwork and how will be different from how it is in game, but yeah. It does seem like she got nerfed in that way. But they did mention that she's getting 2 new modules. They said one will be focused on kind of like an AoE build, so it'll be more wave clear, which will be interesting, because she already does have one, but with Cold Heart. I'm wondering if this will just replace Cold Heart, or if it'll just be like a different method of doing wave clear. We'll see. They didn't show any gameplay, they just talked about it. And then they said the other one is more centered around her identity of being a sniper. And it will be, how do they describe it? The strongest shot in Albion that has piercing abilities. Now, I'm going to be honest, piercing abilities in First Descendant don't really do anything, unless they're massive AoE piercing. And this is because rarely do enemies just line up in a straight line, so if it's just like a small little sniper bullet, you're only going to really be hitting one enemy. If it's a giant AoE, you'll be hitting multiple. So we'll see if the snipers kind of have this not so great identity in First Descendant, because most of the time we're just killing massive waves, and sniper rifles are relatively slow. So if the sniper rifle isn't one-shotting something like a Colossi, it's often useless. Outside maybe being a stat stick for someone like Luna. But once again, we'll see with this. They did talk about how in the content they do want characters with more unique identities have roles, so maybe snipers will have a role in some of the future content. They also did show off Hailey's premium skin for when she gets her Ultimate Edition, and I'd say this looks pretty awful in my opinion. It just doesn't look good. I think her base Ultimate skin looks so much better. And Hailey also just has way better premium skins you can currently buy in the shop. So I think personally, I'll just pass on this one and just use one of the previous skins that just looks a million times better than this, whatever this skin is. And then the big thing that I'm sure most people are excited for with characters is Raven. Although honestly, Raven might be outshined by Ultimate Hailey, because I know Hailey's a fan favorite, since I also do like Hailey a lot. But Raven looks awesome. I mean, just her design alone is just great. Like, she looks awesome. And they said that she's going to be a gun descendant focused around shotguns. But kind of how they described her kind of reminded me of like a classic hunter's kit, because she'll be using a gun, and then she'll be using like a companion summon to also do damaging abilities and fight alongside her. So we'll have to see with this. They said she's scaled with shell count for shotguns. Now, that might mean just another hammer and anvil character, which I think would be disappointing, but there are other shotguns, and including there's one shotgun that gets its shell count up, so that one might synergize with her better. But at the end of the day, I think she's just going to scale with the Transcendent Weapons. Like, it looked like there was a shotgun in that list that they showed, so more than likely she'll just scale with that one. Also, as another note, they did show off her premium skin, and oh my god, this thing looks amazing. It's kind of reminds me of like a Coven witch skin. It just, oh, looks so good. Let's finally now go over all the game modes that they're adding, which there is a lot that they're adding just in this year. So the first one I wanted to go over was the Mega Dungeons. So they talked a little bit about this, and they mainly talked about Corel's Mothership, which is the Mega Dungeon coming out with the launch of Season 4. And this is the dungeon that takes place in that giant ship you guys see in the cinematic for Season 4. So they talked about how they want these Mega Dungeons to have new mechanics and be different from how previous dungeons are. In fact, they said one of the things they want to work on is kind of the variance from run to run, which is something I've talked about a lot personally, that they really need to improve the variance so that if you have players run through your dungeon 30 times, it feels like there's at least some kind of difference between each run, because this helps with like player exhaustion of running through dungeons. And the good thing is it sounds like they're going to work on this. With one of the things they want to go forward with the design in this, it's something similar to the last two dungeons, Legion Laboratory and Bastion of Immortality, where there are alternating paths you take. So this, you don't always take the same path. Sometimes it's path A, sometimes it's path B, sometimes it's path C, which is something I thought they'd need to do for a long time, ever since the first Void Vessel, since Void Vessel number 1 was pretty fun because of that. Like, there was 3 different paths you could take on it. Especially when grinding out that early Void Vessel, it felt like there was a lot of just variance there, and it helped a lot with the exhaustion of it. And made it a lot of fun, in all honesty. So I'm glad they're going forward with this idea. I'd also like to see them add, like, enemy variants. So some random rolled enemies where maybe you're fighting, one group of enemies one time, and the next time you go through that same path, you're fighting a different group of enemies, or maybe a different boss, so on and so forth. They also, like I said, are working on mechanics, and this is something I mentioned previously, that they want to make mechanics that feel like new roles for Descendants would fit into them. They didn't talk about any of these new mechanics really, outside of one of the boss mechanics they mentioned was, instead of having boss mechanics to make the boss weaker that the player does, instead if you do a certain mechanic during boss fight, you might get stronger, like the player would get buffed, which achieves the same result. It's just, leans more into the player power fantasy. But this dungeon, from what they described, is going to be a really massive one for Krell's Mothership. They also mentioned one other thing about this, that there's going to be a new difficulty called Brutal Difficulty. And the roadmap, you guys may have noticed, that said something about Conquest Event, and that's the Brutal Difficulty. So basically, 2 weeks after the patch, they're going to come out with this new difficulty, and it's going to be an event surrounding it. They weren't very clear if Brutal Difficulty will exist beyond that event, but they want to give players at least that 2-week gap to get prepped for Brutal, so you can do practice runs through the dungeon, update builds, grind out all the new stuff, so that when this Brutal Difficulty comes out, you're all prepared. And there will be a lot of cool things with this Brutal Difficulty. Apparently, it'll be kind of like a contest with, different players. There'll be leaderboards. And just completing the Brutal Difficulty will apparently also get your rewards. And I know this is something a lot of people have wanted, was a new difficulty level, so we are actually getting it here. They also did mention Cradle of Evolution. This is another mega dungeon we're getting, or at least another dungeon. And they didn't talk too much about this, we're just getting it September, that's all we know about. Then next they went into Void Intercept Battle Extreme. So people don't know what this is them taking all the Void Intercept battles and everything to the Colossi, kind of condensing it down to one mode, / kind of region of content. And you'll basically be able to set your own difficulty for the Colossi fights with different modifiers. You guys can see on screen there. You can also set your own presets that you can use to just, if you want to do the fight a few times and log off and log back on later, You can choose that preset to use the same settings. So this should be interesting. I don't know quite what all these modifiers will do. They didn't go in depth to that. So we'll have to wait until that comes out, but that is coming out later this month. We'll get the beta mode. So I'm assuming it'll be like Onslaught, where we get it for like the beta for 2 weeks, and then it'll take 2 weeks to refine it before they fully launch it in Season 4. They also did talk about the currency for this. So you'll get some unique currency from every time you defeat the Colossi, and this will be used at some kind of vendor. They didn't say who the vendor will be, and they didn't talk about what you'll be able to get in the shop. So all we know is that you will get a currency and it will be in some kind of shop. And then they did mention one more thing about this. They are working on new Colossi to add to this mode. But they have said in the past it takes, I think, about 8 months for them to make a Colossi. So we just need to be patient on that. They also did say that, as these new Colossi come out and new Abyssals come out with it. By the way, the Abyssals will be put into this mode. They will be combined with Extreme mode. That we will get also new cosmetics to reflect those new Abyssals. So we are going to get more Colossi cosmetics that you guys can grind out for free in the game. And then the next mode they talked about was Trials. Now this is a wave mode. It's not like Onslaught where it's defense wave mode. This seems just like classic wave mode. But it won't be infinite. They said there will be an end, but from what they were kind of making it sound like, it'll be really hard to hit that end. So you will have the option to leave the wave mode at certain intervals. Something like 3 or 5 waves, and then you have the option just to leave with all your loot. Since each new wave, the enemies will get stronger. But on the plus side, you will also get stronger as a player because they are implementing a card system similar to what Onslaught has. But it looks like it'll be slightly different with some different cards. And they said this will be a big aspect for how you'll get stronger and have to deal with the later waves. I'm kind of excited for this, but personally, I wish it was infinite. But if they do have an end wave, hopefully it ends in some kind of grand finale. Kind of like how Onslaught has the final wave be a Colossi fight. Hopefully they have something cool planned. This does appear like it will start out with one map, but they said as time goes on, they do plan to add more maps to it. And then there was one more new game mode they talked about that's coming this year. That's Colosseum. Now, if anyone's played Destiny, and you know what Gambit is, Colosseum A, that was on the roadmap, that's coming out in December, is just Gambit. It's straight up just Gambit. It's almost a 1-to-1 Gambit, it sounds like. Now, for anyone who's never played Gambit, and doesn't know what Colosseum is, let me go and describe, what this game mode is. It's effectively a PvE v PvE. You have 2 teams of Descendants. Both will have 3 Descendants, or 3 players. And they will compete going through a series of missions. Whoever completes their set of missions first wins. With a twist. One of the players from each team, after doing some kind of set conditions, can become a Colossi and invade the other players or the other team's map, where you can fight the other team as a Colossi, disrupting their missions, slowing them down, stopping them. Basically with the idea that you get some kind of advantage to your own team, whether it be time or, so on and so forth, whatever it will be. Now, as I described, for anyone's Destiny, it's just going to be like, yep, that is 100% just Gambit. Which I'm all down for because I actually, when I played Destiny, did enjoy Gambit. So this will be kind of fun. But that's all the information we have from that one. They didn't really talk too much about it outside of that. We don't even know what the rewards will be. But we'll get more information on that probably in like October or November. Since it's not coming out till December. Now, they did mention one other thing about all the game modes. They are going to start updating older game modes with new maps, new enemies, so on and so forth. Like, for example, they said for Onslaught, they are actually currently working on a new map that will be released in Season 4. And some also other updates to Onslaught. So, look forward to all your favorite game modes, getting some good updates. And next up, they talked about the cosmetics. Now, outside of the stuff that was shown for Raven and Hailey with their premium skins, no other cosmetics were shown. But there were a lot of questions in the Q&A section brought up about cosmetics, so I figured we'd chat about that. So, of course, one of the things that was brought up was the cost of skins and maybe lowering them. And they did, in all honesty, say this is a really sensitive issue for them because they are a free-to-play game, and their only real profit comes from skins, so adjusting the prices isn't actually such an easy thing for them to really even talk about. Especially not on a live stream. But they did say they'd have more internal discussions about this, but it is a sensitive issue. They did also comment about their kind of design philosophy, and they felt like maybe one of the reasons that players feel like the skins might be a little more expensive is because the quality isn't as good as it should be. And they said going forward, they're going to try to improve the skins even more so people feel like it's more worth the price. And one of the ways they said they were going to do this was make it so certain features of skins could be toggled on and off. For example, if maybe that new skin you like had a jacket that you're like, if it just wasn't for that jacket, I might really like this skin. Well, with these toggle options, you'll be able to toggle the jacket off and still have the skin. It will all be one price skin. Of course, like if you buy the skin, you'll get all those features. So you can toggle the jacket on and off if you want. But that'll be a way to improve it. So this is kind of similar to how you can toggle like Sharon's mask on and off, or Serena's wings on and off. It'll be similar to that. And they said it won't only be jackets, it'll be like a whole bunch of different accessories and parts of the skins. They even said this will come up when players really want like a version of a skin without something that was already there. And then they also went on to a little bit more of their design philosophy and skins. And with them being maybe too revealing or not. And they said, for skins, it doesn't really matter if it's revealing or not. They said a good skin is a solid idea with a good execution. I agree. Most skins, you just want a good idea and it be solidly executed. And it's kind of went to like a little bit more of like having more variety in skins. And they said a good example of this was like the ninja skin line, which was, less revealing for the most part, but was pretty well purchased because they felt like it was a good execution of a good idea. And I agree, the skin line was really good for the ninja skin line. And they said they want to continue doing this going forward. So overall, we'll see in the future how the cosmetics go. Honestly, I think overall the cosmetics in First Descendant are really, really good already. So I'm excited to see like an even improved version on top of that. They also did mention there will be more comedic skins, like joke skins, kind of like the corn skin coming out. In fact, in the, roadmap for this month, there's a burger skin coming out, so that's something to be kind of excited for. They're always funny to see, although I don't know how much people actually use those skins. And now let's talk about the Q&A section. I did try and include a lot of the information from the Q&A in the sections that were already relevant, but there was some leftover information that I figured we should go over. So one of the things I did chat about was trigger modules and ancestor modules, and the, kind of unsatisfaction with ancestor modules in general. And it sounds like there are plans in the works to continue to improve ancestor modules and make them feel better. So that was kind of the conclusion of that. Then for trigger modules, it was brought up that it kind of feels weird that trigger modules are only increasing damage and not doing any kind of utility or anything. And it turns out their whole design philosophy of trigger modules was just another way to kind of like balance out Descendants for the most part. But they did say going forward, since they have been doing monthly rebalances on Descendants already, making trigger modules do kind of utility things or things outside damage, especially with there being more roles that they want to kind of have Descendants fill with the new mechanics coming out, that they would look into doing trigger modules that do more unique things. Then they talked about increasing biochip max storage and max friends list. They said they would discuss this internally, but it's probably something they could do. And they also talked about guilds. It was kind of a broad feature, where their kind of whole view on guilds was they need like some kind of gameplay aspect. And then it was brought up in the Q&A that they could be more of just like a social aspect, which I agree with. You can have guilds just be a social aspect in the game. And they said this is kind of an interesting idea that they hadn't really thought about. But either way, guilds would be massively on the back burner. What they're mainly focusing on right now is anything that's relevant to what they view as priority issues. So, currently that's like fixing the endgame loop, making more game modes, increasing player satisfaction. And they view guilds and anything else that wouldn't really help with any of these things need to be much lower priorities and are massively in their backlog. So don't expect guilds anytime soon, but it is a possibility in the future. And with it being the second anniversary, there's a lot of in-game events currently going on in-game that you guys can get a whole bunch of good resources from, as you can see on the screen there. So don't forget to check these out. There will also be Twitch drops with it being the second anniversary, so don't forget to also get all those as well. Also, on top of all this other stuff, there were 4 codes released during the dev live. I'll go ahead and throw them up on the screen there. Don't forget to enter in all these, because you will also get a whole bunch of good resources and rewards. And they're finally doing something that's been really requested by the community, and that's physical merchandise. And they're starting with figures. There's actually going to be 3, and you can pre-order them right now. You can do that through, I believe, their website. Now, these actually all look really good in my opinion, and hopefully this means we'll get more types of physical merchandise in the future, maybe like jackets or keychains I think would be cool, or maybe even like a backpack. I think all that stuff would be cool, but at least they're starting out with something, which is just these figures. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up for this recap video. Now, I really do think Season 4 just looks amazing so far. There's so much cool stuff we're going to be able to do. All those new game modes they showed, the new characters, and even the Transcendent Weapons also look like a lot of fun. I think that in-game loop's going to be really enjoyable. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you guys like all the stuff they announced for Season 4? Is there anything you didn't like? Are you hyped for it? Let me know. Also, if you guys did like the video or are hyped for Season 4, go ahead and hit that like button if you could. I'd appreciate it. And if you want to know when new content's coming out, don't forget that subscribe button and that notification bell. Also, I do stream most days on Twitch. Don't forget there are also Twitch drops going on. I'll go ahead and throw up the Twitch information on screen there. And once again, if you guys could hit that like button, I really would appreciate it. It helps the video get out to a lot more people. And I'll wrap it up for this video. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all again next time.